And
Sir,
yeah, VP, anything?
sir, as he said, no, sir, there will be Colonel Ashok will be coming in and setting the context. Then I'll introduce you, and then we'll begin.
Yeah. So, Colonel Saab, over to you, please.
Good evening, folks. A hearty welcome to this another beautiful webinar that we have with a very special speaker today. The topic that we've chosen today is something that is of great interest to us. Defense procurement, with a whole lot of activity happening within the subcontinent, across the world, all over. We just seen what's happened across on the European Asian border, Ukraine and Russia. A whole lot of activities happening around that. And as far as coming closer into the country, Atmanirbhar into defense procurement has been picking up for a long time now. The government, the PM have taken special interest in that. So folks, to build up on that, we have a very special speaker today. It's going to be a great honor to hear to him. I'll now hand over to Colonel VP. Colonel VP, may I request you to kindly inaugurate and bring the speaker on stage, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Colonel Ashok, sir. I am really too honored to be hosting and being part of this wonderful evening where General Dr. Saha has been is here with us, and he'll be enlightening us on Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense and the prospects of private sector. I would like to, it's very difficult for me to introduce such a wonderful and tall personality and such an honored and decorated army soldier and veteran. However, I'll make an attempt. Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha, a very, very highly decorated soldier, is a recipient of Param Vishesh Seva Medal, Uttam Yuddha Seva Medal, Yuddha Seva Medal, Vishesh Seva Medal twice, Chief of the Army Staff Commendation Card twice, and GOCC Western Command Card. He retired as Deputy Chief of the Army Staff, where he was responsible for respective planning, force modernization, and capability development. He created the Army Design Bureau in 2016. After the retirement, he was the member of National Security Advisory Board. He was the founding director for School of Military Affairs and Strategy, and also the founding director for Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers, that is SIDM. His in-depth strategic insight is based on his experience in 15 Corps Commander in Kashmir, where he commanded there in 2014 and 15. He was Additional Director General in the Military Operations 13-14. He commanded a division in the Strike Corps and a brigade commander on LOC in high altitude area. He had held various appointments across his illustrious career. He was also part of United Nations mission in Angola in 1996 as Deputy Regional Commander. During his illustrious career, he has done extremely well on his professional courses and qualifications. He is one of the only 3 officers who were awarded distinguished grading in junior command course. He is the only Indian Army officer who has done 2 staff colleges, one in Camberley, UK, and the other one is United States of America. And he was the best overseas student there and got the gold medal for a high command course. He is a PhD in irregular warfare from University of Allahabad. He is MPhil, double master's degree from Madras University in Pennsylvania, USA. He is a distinguished fellow of Center of Joint Warfare Studies, and his articles, papers, and opinion pieces are widely published in Indian and foreign journals. He speaks regularly at the USA WC, NDC, Higher Command, DSSC, and various think tanks. Now, without taking much time, I would like to request our esteemed guest today, Lieutenant General Dr. Subrata Saha. Welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Colonel VP. Thank you, Colonel Ashok. Thank you, Mr. Luthra, and all who are participating today. It is certainly a fantastic opportunity and an honor for me to be able to speak to all of you. And we are touching upon a very contemporary, very relevant topic. In fact, just this morning, the Prime Minister addressed a sort of primer kind of a seminar, which was conducted by the Department of Defense Production this morning, emphasizing exactly what we are going to touch upon now on participation of private sector in defense. See, if you recall, first, of course, on 15th August 2014, when the Prime Minister spoke to the country and the world from the Red Fort, that is the time when he spoke about, come make in India. We have steel, we have resolve, we have diamond, we have everything. So starting from submarines to spaceships, come make in India. And more recently, 2022, May of 2020, after the incidents happened in eastern Ladakh and followed by Galwan, when the Prime Minister had visited Leh, and quite interestingly, his call for Atmanirbhar Bharat came from Leh. So I am trying to connect these 2 points to tell you that I think fundamental to Atmanirbharta is being self-reliant in defense. Although since 2001, the government had opened up, direct private sector participation in defense, but for multiple reasons, we don't have time to go into all of that. I will refer to them wherever it is relevant. But for multiple reasons, it did not take off the way it should have. And eventually, it's in 2014, after the call for Make in India, that we have seen some traction developing in this direction. So personally, from my side, I have been quite closely involved in this process. I moved from Srinagar, Kashmir, after commanding 15 Corps as Deputy Chief of Army Staff, where my responsibilities were capability development, force modernization, and so on. So soon after taking over, when I did the calculations, I discovered that the kind of requirements that we have in the armed forces, there is no way by which the public sector can meet it, even if it were to operate at full capacity. So at that time, I created a small team of 6 brigadiers, and literally every weekend we were out to different academic and industrial hubs across the country. 32 countries we have, 32 places we have visited, interacted with almost 4,000 plus people, and told them what the requirements were for the forces. And in the process, we also gained a lot of knowledge of the capability that existed in the country, but in penny packets distributed all over. So thereafter, to put the whole thing together, on 31st August 2016, thanks to a very visionary defense minister that time, Shri Manohar Parrikar, we created the Army Design Bureau to act as the repository for this particular initiative and taking it all forward. So in that process, we were able to take several industries, professors from various engineering colleges, IITs and all, to different areas along the borders, along the coastal areas, to show them the challenges as they are in the field, to give them a sense of it. Some very good solutions came out. And then we took it further to demonstrate to the people the equipment that we have in the forces, so that they could take a look as to which are the spots from where the Indian industry or the Indian research can pick up and start giving us solutions to indigenize. And I recall at every session, I used to conclude by saying that, at the end of this initiative, we are all targeting just one simple mission, that is to win India's wars with Indian solutions. And I say this on purpose because, having commanded 15 Corps in Kashmir, and for that matter, on earlier occasions along the line of control and in such counterinsurgency and counterterrorism areas, whether it was in Punjab, Northeast, and such like places, including even on the Siachen Glacier, you do realize that, okay, you may be getting some very fine equipment by import, but to sustain that equipment in India, it is not easy at all, number one. Second, invariably, you are adapting from somebody else's operational requirements into our operational requirements, which is so different, which is so varied from others. So that with that, sort of mission, we went out, and I think now the whole process has picked up such momentum that all I see in front is expanding opportunities, as we are going ahead. Now, as far as the security situation is concerned, we all know that one, of course, is this most immediate what's happening in Europe. It is quite clearly a very strong reminder to us as a country, how important it is to be self-reliant in defense, because you cannot afford to be dependent on any side, because moment you are dependent, you have to start compromising your strategic freedom. You have to start compromising you may have to start, compromising your strategic decisions. Now, for example, you may be reading in the media that, okay, the Americans will again use their sanctions. Because of their sanctions against Russia, directly or indirectly, India gets affected because of its dependency of weapon systems from Russia. And the same thing will apply, because now progressively we have given a lot of orders and expectations we have from the US. So this kind of dilemma will continue. Even without what is happening in Europe, if you see our own neighborhood, it's not a choice. We have a neighborhood which is not particularly friendly, and it is going to remain like that at least in the foreseeable future, because our borders with China remain unresolved. With Pakistan, it is a perpetual problem. So therefore, the security requirements will be what it is. And add to that the fact that the way our economy is picking up, the way, despite the pandemic, I hope it gets back to its curve of growth.
Yeah.
Recall some time back, the Prime Minister had said that we are targeting a $5 trillion economy. Now, you cannot have a $5 trillion economy without strongly undergirding it with security. So therefore, the requirement of security is only increasing. And as the nation grows, the international expectations from India with regard to security also increase. I mean, so that is the reason why we keep hearing statements that India should be providing the security in the Indian Ocean region. And now we are seeing this so commonly used, the term Indo-Pacific from Asia-Pacific. In other words, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean are being combined into one larger global common, and with security expectations from India. So therefore, our security expectations are only going to keep increasing, and we have to keep living up to that new challenge. So now, if you see our budget, even in our budget, these security expectations from the country are getting reflected one way or the other. If you see the last 3 years, for example, in 2019-20, our defense budget was 4,31,000 crores. In the last financial year, it went up to 4,78,000 crores. And in the current budget, which has just been announced, it has gone up to 5,25,000 crores. So that's a huge sum of money. And that's a huge sum of money which has to be expended within the year. So obviously, there are expectations and there are opportunities from the industry, as it were. And out of this budget, of course, there are several heads under which the expenses have to take place. But what would be of immediate relevance is the capital budget, for example, with which long-term procurements are done. Even if you see the capital budget in 2021, it was 34,510 crores, which went up by to 1,35,000, and in the current budget, it has gone up to 1,52,000 crores. The interesting part is, since the last financial year, the government has started making yet another commitment in the budget to state that X percentage out of the capital procurement will be done from domestic sources. And in the last financial year, that is 21-22, 58% of the capital procurement was earmarked for procurement from domestic industry. And in the current budget, it has been raised from 58 to 68% from the domestic defense industry. So here lies the opportunity. When the budget is being put out with very clear commitment that 68% will be procured, 68% of 1,52,000 crores will be procured from domestic defense industries. So obviously, there is a huge opportunity. The other set of figures which I want to flag to you is, if you see which is still in a draft stage and it's in the final stages of going up to the Cabinet Committee for Security, is the draft defense export and production policy. Now, if you see the draft of this, which is put up in the Ministry of Defense Department of Defense Production website, it says that the target is to achieve a defense industry whose turnover is 1,75,000 crores. I repeat again, 1,75,000 crores by 2025, which is just 3 years down the line. And currently, the defense industry is 80,000 crores. Now, out of these 80,000 crores, 63,000 crores is with the public sector, 17,000 crores is with the private sector. I repeat again, a target 1,75,000 crores. Current 80,000 crores distributed to 63,000 with the public and 17,000 with the private sector. Now, this expansion, from 80 to 1,75,000 obviously assumes a large-scale participation of the private sector, because without participation of the private sector, we do not see these figures getting achieved. And why do I say that? In the very beginning, I had said that when I had done the calculations way back in 2015, we knew that the public sector was operating literally up to its full capacity. So another reform which was undertaken last year, and I was chairman of that committee which recommended that reform, was the corporatization of the ordnance factories, which has just been implemented in October last year. And so 41 ordnance factories have been converted into 7 defense public sector units. Earlier, we had 9 defense public sector units, to which get added now 7 defense public sector units. So it is 16 DPSUs. So all these 16 DPSUs will have phenomenal requirements to sort of outsource and put out for the MSME and others. And of course, even the larger figure of 1,75,000 crores will have some very big budget, very high ticket items which have come out for the private sector, even if it goes to those who are well established. From them will come out a whole range of orders and opportunities for those industries who are not in defense just yet, or who haven't reached that level in defense so far. The other interesting feature from this year's budget is it has been announced, and this was there also in the Prime Minister's address this morning when he spoke in this primer to the DEF Expo, which is happening from 10th to 13th March in Gandhinagar, Gujarat, is that 25% of the defense R&D, research and development expenditure, is being earmarked for startups, for small scale industries, and for the academia. So fund allocation is to be done out of the defense R&D, which was until now the exclusive preserve of the DRDO. Now it is being put out for the purposes of getting increased participation from the private sector, because the whole intention is ultimately the country should be able to design and develop its own weapon systems. After all, for those of you who are from the manufacturing side, you know very well that ultimately it's about technology, it's about the material, it's about the engineering to do with the manufacture, followed by trials and certification, procurement, and of course, sustenance. And I bring out sustenance over here because in the defense forces, most of the items have a very long in-service life. If you take a tank, for example, officially it is supposed to be 30 to 35 years, but with upgrades, we even take it to 40, 45, maybe a little more. So therefore, there are constant requirements of sustenance of equipment in which there is going to be opportunity. In fact, if you happen to and make an entry either at the production level or even later at the level of sustenance once, it's a recurring requirement which will be which will come up your way as you keep going. But then, having said that, I must also mention that yes, the initial entry is a challenge because you have to meet stringent standards of quality, stringent standards of timelines, because if the quality product is not there, it is obviously going to be operating in circumstances which are much more stressful, whether it is the dynamic stress or whether it is the environmental stress. Both stresses are of a much higher order when we talk about military grade equipment. So that is the reason why we make a distinction world over between military grade equipment and commercial equipment. So therefore, if those quality and timelines can be met, obviously you tend to remain engaged for a much longer lifespan than probably any other equipment which you do, any other piece of item that you use on a day-to-day basis from the commercial domain. Having said that, I must also tell you that because the quality conditions are more stringent, so therefore the value is also higher. I mean, if you do a comparative of the costing, let us say, of a particular item which is fitted into shall we say, an automobile with a regular requirement of moving on highways, vis-a-vis an automobile which has to operate in cross-country, in high altitude, in snow, obviously the cost of whatever goes into that is also higher. So therefore, the stringent qualities, conditions of quality and time are adequately compensated even in terms of the costing. So it is a good domain to be in, but yes, there are challenges which have to be overcome to get values. The other point which I want to make while at this point itself is the thrust which is being given to export. Up until very recently, we were almost for a decade plus, the highest importers of defense equipment with literally zero export. In the last about 4 to 5 years, we have improved quite a bit. I mean, like from, shall we say, 5 years back when we were roughly around 1,600 crores worth of defense export. In the last financial year, we have touched 8,000, almost close to 9,000 crores worth of defense exports, which is nothing as compared to the potential that the country has. And keeping that in mind, in the defense export and production policy, the target that has been stipulated to be achieved in defense export by 2025 is 35,000 crores. 35,000 crores of defense export. So again, there is huge opportunity here. And now if you break down and start studying as to what exactly the requirements are, whether it is the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, you see a plethora of requirements. For example, the Army at any given time operates around 150 to 160 procurement schemes. Navy probably half of that, Air Force probably a little lesser than that. But that is the number of schemes, schemes meaning items being procured. That is the number of schemes that are run at any given time. And if you remember the original figures that I spoke to you about, 1.5 lakh crores worth of procurement in one financial year, obviously it gets distributed like that. So the numbers are big and the opportunities are huge. It is up to us how we want to take it. Now, very quickly, let me move on to what are the kind of procurements that we do. I have several times already spoken to you regarding the capital procurements. Yes, there is the figures I've just given to you. Then we have what is called the revenue procurements. Now, capital procurements are procurements which are done for longer duration, for larger equipment systems, etc. And then we have revenue procurements, which are primarily there to sustain the equipment for its complete lifespan. So some spares are required, some components are required, sometimes some minor upgrades, although upgrades get covered by capital procurement, some minor upgrades are required. So that's how the revenue procurement is done. So there are clear-cut budgetary allocations for capital procurement and revenue procurement. Within capital procurement, I told you there is a percentage which has now been stipulated that will be taken from domestic industries. Then we have the third kind of procurement, which especially the smaller industries may be interested. Smaller industries, why I keep coming to them again and again, because experience tells you that they are much more agile, they are much more quick in their decision making, so they are able to come up to this requirement. So the third kind of procurement are what are known as the C&C in the case of Army, the Army Commander's Special Financial Powers. Now, for example, Northern Command, which is based out of Udhampur, is responsible for all of Jammu and Kashmir, for example. Northern Command's annual budget of Army Commander's Special Financial Powers is 400 crores. Now, this 400 crores have been provided for meeting their urgent operational needs. And why urgent operational needs? Why urgent operational needs? It is because, let us say you are on the line of control, where the situation is dynamic, it is evolving, and side by side, there are new technologies that are coming in. So if you do not want to get into the long procurement cycle, which is there, let's say for capital procurement. So therefore, this kind of delegated, authority has been given to the Army commanders to go ahead and meet their urgent operational requirements through the Army Commander's Special Financial Powers. And then, of course, there are plenty of opportunities, I touched upon it in passing, to operate as subsidiaries of the defense public sector units. Now, just to name them, let us say you've got the Hindustan Aeronautical Complex, you got the Bharat Dynamics, who are manufacturing missiles, you got Bharat Electronics, who manufacture the whole range of military electronics, then you got Bharat Earth Movers Limited, who are supplying metro rails as well as who are supplying to the defense. Then you got Midhani, who does the material, and then you got the shipyards. And now added to that are these 7 new defense public sector units, the erstwhile ordnance factories. So as subsidiaries of that, again, there are huge opportunities. Each one of them is assigned targets for indigenization. Each one of them is assigned, these percentages of what they have to achieve out of domestic industry. So that is the next opportunity. And the other one is as subsidiaries of the Defense Research and Development Organization. Until now, industries were being identified and were being made part of their R&D, their research, design and development process. And then obviously they would become the production partners. Now to that, as I mentioned a little while back, has been added in this budget, the 25% of defense R&D allocation which is to be done for the purposes of the private sector, whether startups, MSMEs, or academic institutions, one way or the other. And yet another opportunity is to join hands with an academic institutions. So in other words, as an industry, you are sort of, outsourcing your R&D to an academic institution. So together you make, some kind of a partnership or SPV or whatever you want to call it, and come up with whatever is the requirement. So these are the multiple methods of, multiple ways by which the defense procures. Now, all this is to do with the warlike stores. And then there are non-warlike stores, whether it is in terms of clothing, and when I say clothing which is being used, for example, by our soldiers who are deployed in the Siachen Glacier in eastern Ladakh, where we are, in this never-ending standoff with the Chinese. So that's those kind of clothing and all happens. In fact, if you just permit me a quick anecdote, we have been procuring our high altitude such kind of equipment from earlier we were procuring from Switzerland, from Italy and so on, because they were manufacturing them for the purposes of their mountaineering expeditions to Alps and so on. Quite coincidentally, when we were having our interaction in Bhubaneswar, we came across an industry that was manufacturing similar cold weather equipment, of course, of a slightly lower temperature range, and supplying it to the Swiss police from India. So that's what I say, that there are capabilities which are lying in India untapped, because as I saw a question also, somebody just popped up, why is this lack of awareness over there? I think one of the gaps that we are trying to bridge today is to bring in greater awareness. I just saw that question by somebody, it popped up on my screen. So getting back to the point, so therefore, whether it is in non-warlike stores, whether it is in terms of clothing, whether it is in terms of buildings, whether it is in terms of, other infrastructure. So there are requirements which are not necessarily in the warlike stores domain, in the non-warlike store domain. So which is again a huge one, and most of the money for that comes out of the revenue budget. Now back to the capital procurement again, we have various categories of procurement. We can take them up when we have more time or in later sessions for more smaller groups, more focused groups, if you will, and we can discuss them in detail. But just to tell you, the highest, or shall we say, the highest priority of procurement is given to what is called Buy Indian, Designed, Developed and Manufactured, followed by Buy Indian. The difference between the two is, in one of them, it is 60%, it has to be in indigenous content. In the other one, it comes down to 50%, so like this. And then you have something called the Buy and Make India. Then apart from that, we have this Make procedure. In Make procedure, we have Make 1, in which 90% or 80% is funded by the government, and the balance is funded by the industry. It is meant for larger equipment. It is meant for larger systems. And then we have Make 2 for smaller systems, in which it is again designed and developed by the industry. But the advantage in Make is should you qualify for that design and development, and should you go through the trials, the orders are assured for you. So it is a little longer process, but with assured orders. So that's how, it varies from one to the other. And there are a whole lot of schemes and projects which are part of all these. Then we also have some opportunities that come through what is called the discharge of offsets. So when we are doing procurement through import, it is being imported from a foreign country. So an offset obligation is put in the contract. That means X percentage of the total procurement scheme, you will have to discharge it through Indian industry. So the decision to select the industry etc., is left to the foreign original equipment manufacturer, FOEM in short. So they have the freedom to go and choose. So again, through the offset, a lot of people have made it through that. The advantage is they are able to utilize the guidance and the technology from the foreign original equipment manufacturer, produce it in India, supply it to the scheme at the time of its procurement, and thereafter, obviously, they become the lifetime partner for that particular component or spare, whatever that they have manufactured in India. So offset, there are a number of industries that have succeeded big time through the offset route also. And then, of course, is the FDI route, the foreign direct investment route, in which industries have made partners with foreign countries, and they have helped in setting up FDIs through joint ventures and so on. And then we also have something called the Strategic Partnership Program, which is, of course, for very large, systems, like, for example, take the next generation of tanks, take some ships, submarines, and so on. So they are generally happening through these strategic partnership routes. So that's also an avenue for those that are interested. Then we have other, methods by which younger entrepreneurs who can, who wish to enter defense can come in through innovation for defense excellence, and then also submitting solutions in response to the various challenges or compendium of problem statements that are put out by the services from time to time. So even they provide some opportunities. Now, DRDO, besides this 25%, which was announced in this year's budget, has been also providing what is called the TDF, or the Technology Development Fund projects, which they support for such young entrepreneurs, or shall we say, for such entrepreneurs who wish to enter this defense. And lately, we are seeing that the encouragement or the incentives which are being given for licensing also is good. I mean, which was the duration of the licensing has been increased by almost 3 times. I think it is initial licensing itself is about 15 years, much more than what it used to be earlier. And like this, various kinds of incentives, etc., are being provided. Then some facilitation in terms of export clearance and so on. And we are also seeing that various state governments are also coming up with their own respective defense industrial policies, which means primarily the incentives that they provide in that particular state if you were to invest there. And from the central government side, 2 defense industrial corridors have been set up. One is the Southern Defense Industrial Corridor, which is also sometimes called Tamil Nadu Industrial Corridor, even though it does touch Bangalore. So that is one over there, and the other one is the Uttar Pradesh Defense Industrial Corridor, which started in 2018. It has already picked up a pretty good pace, and I think it's only a matter of a couple of years when we will see deliveries coming out from that as well. So in very from my side, simple terms, I have tried to put out to you in the last almost 39 minutes the various opportunities which are there in the field of defense. It's only expanding. That's all that I can tell you. And this is a field which is certain to see. Let's call it a sunrise field, a sunrise sector in which you can make an entry. A sunrise sector which has already been described as a strategic sector in the Make in India policy, which was issued by the government. And by strategic sector means the emphasis is on technology, quality, and so on. And of course, the demands that, okay, you must generate so many jobs and all, the expectation is far lesser than perhaps some of the other ones, which have been categorized into such. So this is a sector which is a strategic sector. This is a sector in which you can come in and participate and take advantage of the opportunities. And at the same time, I think everybody, each one of us is a very strong patriot. So anybody would feel happy to be able to contribute in this sector. So I end once again with my favorite, that together with your cooperation, together with your contribution, the country we should be able to win India's wars with Indian solutions. So I will stop here. It's exactly 4:40 p.m. So it's back to you, and you can moderate the questions, please.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful, really hearing you, sir. Really privileged. And the way the government has come forward and the kind of options that they've generated all across, the manner in which they're reducing the barriers and increasing the mode of helping across the industry are wonderful, sir. We learned that how various levels are available, right from startups to major level. At every level it's possible, sir. I would just... there's a call coming in. Sorry, there was a call coming in between. Folks, some queries. I did see one question, sir. Somebody's expecting, Inder Gujral is asking, what is the impact of lack of knowledge about opportunities in defense industry? Impact of lack of knowledge about opportunities. So basically, it's trying to say that the probably as far as the forces are concerned, defense forces are concerned, there's a lack of knowledge. While the government is doing so much, people who are in touch with these agencies are understanding. But anybody wants to start afresh, I suppose is asking about them, what can the corporate world do? What ways can we improve this aspect so that corporate world can improve their contribution? So he's, I suppose, trying to take it ahead from here, sir. That how can we, the talk is generated interest. How can we take it? How can we speak to our leaders and sort of bridge this gap?
Okay, so as I said, I think we have already tried to create a small bridge, through this talk to give you I will say, a very broad overview, but with some very specific facts and figures on where the opportunity lies. So depending on what is your interest, we can take it further. So I'm not very sure, Mr. Indapal Gujral, which is exactly your domain of interest. But in case you let us know, that we can, sort of suggest to you as to where do the opportunities, lie for you. You can just key it into the chat box. We will pick it up from there. If you can indicate your interest, I will see how to what occurs to me immediately as a response to your, make it more, make the answer a little more specific.
Perfect, sir. Folks, in the meantime, anybody else? Jay Srivastav, you wanted to convey something?
Well, so yeah. We've got few more questions which are there on the YouTube there. So I'll quickly read it out. So the first one is, so we have it from Mr. Santosh Kumar Gupta. He's saying, sir, how Indian economy get affected with the war of Ukraine versus Russia, and what impact is on the Indian economy?
Okay, that's a very, very interesting question. See, first, what happens if, for example, one of the threat of sanctions which has been given to Russia is that the US is saying that we will deny you the international financial systems. Okay, so that is something which is certain to have an indirect effect on us, because when a large power is, denied the international financial systems, it is surely going to have an indirect effect on us as well. To which we are also hearing that, okay, China is, offering alternatives. China is offering alternatives to Russia. I am told, as per the open source media, that they have already agreed to procure some large quantities of wheat, and they are also talking in terms of some of the energy resources to get routed into China, and obviously it will go beyond from there. So how that is going to pan out, we are still to see. But more immediate effects, of course, you must be seeing the price of Brent crude has already gone up to $105. Yesterday it was, day before yesterday it was 100. Yesterday has gone up to 105. So obviously that is the impact will start showing, and it is almost certain to start, adding to inflation and so on. So that is the second impact that we are almost sure to see. The third, as I can see it, if this complete world economic order were to go through this disruption from its current system into a system where a Chinese-driven alternative is going to come into the play, it will come with its own complications. It will come with its own challenges that we have to deal with. And in the case of India particularly, the challenge becomes a little more complex because we have a certain military situation of confrontation, which is on along our borders, but at the same time, we have a huge trade relationship, which has gone up, in fact, last year over the previous year. And so that will have its own dynamic. How this whole thing is going to unfold, it's a little, premature to make very specific comments, but suffice to say that these kind of impacts are sure to come. And then more specifically, for all those specific sectors on which we were dependent on Russia, for example, they are going to have an impact. And likewise, there are some specific sectors on which we are dependent even on Ukraine. Ukraine, for example, does supply a large number of, especially smaller systems, components, spares in the defense domain to India. And economics and defense are, of course, highly interrelated. I mentioned during the course of my talk also, now in case sanctions were to be put on Russia, it will have a bearing on how India is going to continue to do its military procurements from Russia. And then in the larger context, we have our own, economic relations with Germany, big time. We have economic relations with UK, with France, and so on. Now, all these three countries that I have just named have, put sanctions on the Russia. Whether those sanctions will have a direct or indirect impact on India and its economy is a matter of detail, but then that certainly would get factored. So as I look at it, these would be the range of impacts that we have to be prepared. So let's see how this whole thing unfolds. I think, in a sense, if you see, Russia had been making this noise of the NATO expanding very, very close to its border, despite the promises that were given to President Gorbachev at the time of, the collapse of the Soviet Union. But that has happened till it has reached what, in Putin's mind, I think, seems to be a red line beyond which it was unacceptable for him. So therefore, we are seeing the way the whole scenario is unfolding. And even in the current, immediate situation, it is not as if things happened overnight. The buildup was noticed long back. After the buildup, they upscaled it to carry out military exercises. After upscaling it to military exercises, then they took the political decision of recognizing those two, Luhansk and Donetsk, those two, what are now being called the breakaway states. And then they, started the military action. So the point which I'm trying to make is it is not as sudden as it is being made out to be. I mean, I think when it came to the West, they underestimated they underestimated Putin's resolve to act. So therefore, it seems like a shock whose shock waves are traveling. Like you see the way the stock markets have reacted yesterday. So all of it is bound to play out as we go into the future. So we have to see how it all unfolds, and it would be interesting. We still have another month before the budget is passed and implemented. What sort of discussions, deliberations, and what sort of factoring in takes place before the budget for the coming year gets passed and ready for implementation starting 1st April. Back to you.
It's a greatly explained, General Saab. And I'm just reading, there were a lot of conversations which has started on the YouTube there. And somehow, so we've got two different perspectives from one person only. He's Captain Elroy Colasso, and somehow I'm also agreeing to those perspectives. One is, which is a good one, which picking up from your conversation, that there is an allocation of funds to the startups, which is there and which is a positive step. And on the other hand, what he's also mentioning, that India is a startup hub, and indigenous operations is a must rather than depending on other countries. So would just like to seek your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so this is something which, I mean, the realization is coming more and more. If you see, 2001, we opened up to private sector participation, but we did not get the kind of response that we're expecting. 2014 onwards, we are seeing a much more, shall we say, persistent drive towards this. And then came into discourse the startups. And there was a realization, I recall, when we were working on the defense procurement procedure 2016. I was part of the committee that was, putting out that DPP 2016. We realized that there are no provisions in it which is encouraging the startup, because it almost assumed that it's a matured industry which is coming in to participate in defense procurement. So this huge potential, as you say, India is the startup hub of the world. This huge potential of the startup, the capacities were not built up for that. So after that, two lines were picked up. Is from 2016 onwards, the TDF, that is the Technology Development Fund allocation, was increased to 100 crores annually. And then in 2018, the IDEX, that is Innovation for Defense Excellence, was announced by the Prime Minister himself in April of 2018 in the Defense Expo. So that was the second which was put in. And third thing, which each service, in fact, I had started that for the Army, and we were the first to take off, the compendium of problem statements, seeking solutions from the industry, from the startups and so on. And wherever such projects required financial support, we were taking them up through what is called the ATB, that is the Army, each respective services, Army, Navy, Air Force, their technology board funds. So that's how we start. That's how this whole, plethora of initiatives were started to create this space and opportunity for the startups. And in this year's budget, again, I'm repeating, 25% of defense R&D has been allocated for this purpose. So I think this seems like some very good opportunities from the central level, from the Ministry of Defense and its, various subsidiaries for startups directly. Now, besides this, each DPSU is also encouraging their own set of, startups for meeting their specific requirements. So that is the other opportunity which is there for startups to come in. And of course, final one, which if I may add, is the Army Commander's Special Financial Powers Fund also builds in that little scope. The Training Command funds also builds in some scope, not very large, not very high, but builds in scope for startups. So that is the range of opportunity that exists today for startups. It's back to you.
Right. Thank you so much. So I think this comes to the next, which is kind of a follow-up question on that. So we all know that we've been moving towards the Atmanirbhar Bharat, and so if I look at the other side of it, then definitely it is also going to impact, or probably I'll put it as a question that what is the impact of India, with the relationship with the other countries who are providing us the equipment still now.
You see, I think I am talking to a bunch of to a very eminent, bunch of people, very eminent people who have excelled in their fields of industry and corporate, whichever field you are in.
Right.
So the point is, all these countries that you are referring to, actually, they are quite, flexible. My experience tells me, out of the, if you have to rate the flexibility, I find Israel is the fastest, to adapt, and followed by all the other countries. It is not as if moment Make in India came, moment IDDM came, so they Indian design, development, manufactured. So what did they start doing? Because, for example, in IDDM, if the mandated thing is 60% indigenous content, okay, if it is not designed and developed in India, if it is not designed in India, and if it is designed and developed, then it is 40% content. So they find their space in these policy arrangements which are there to come and contribute. So like this, they are adapting themselves to meet our requirements. So it is not as if anybody is getting upset or we are feeling cut off with India. They all realize that with our kind of requirements, I have given to you the kind of money which is involved. Obviously, there is a limit up to which India can economically and therefore politically keep giving out this money to some for the benefit of some foreign country. It has got to plow it back into its own economy for its own sake. Otherwise, how do you sustain this population, the size of which is what it is, and how do you achieve a target of a $5 trillion economy? So I think this is something which everyone understands, and they adapt their business goals according to our changing business goals, because ultimately the control of money is with the country and with the government. So therefore, they will modify and adapt their goals accordingly.
Right.
Back to you.
Okay. I'm just picking up a few more questions here. 1 second, sir. Just check. Well, I don't see any questions on the YouTube. So, however, General Saab, I have one question here because I've noted it down. So when you talked about 17,000 crores, which has been dedicated to the private sectors, which is a very huge number, and as when you mentioned those 68%, and then you talked about 17,000 crore, even there were people messaging saying that it's a huge amount. So I'm just for our members and our vendor community there, just wanted to understand that what are those areas in which these private sectors can contribute. It could be directly or indirectly.
Okay, so depending on what is the industry that we are talking about, we can align it to more specific requirements. Okay, let's go step by step. Let's look at Army, for example. Most indeed all our tanks, except for Arjun, which is a very limited number of regiments, all our tanks are of Russian origin. And bulk of the fleet, for example, is T-72 and T-90. And now the Army is looking for the next generation of tanks, which they have brought it under a program called Future Ready Combat Vehicles. Okay, now in this Future Ready Combat Vehicle, they are looking at the complete replacement of the T-72 series of tanks, for example. So now once the FRCV program kicks off, which as of now is contemplated as a strategic partnership program. In other words, since the FRCV program is going to come out either as a strategic partnership or whether it comes out as a make program, it will require a whole lot of industries to support it. Even when the T-90 is being manufactured in India as a licensed production from Russia, there are at least 1,000+ industries who supply components and other system subsystems to the heavy vehicle factory in Avadi, and they are integrating the whole thing. Of course, they are doing a fair amount of manufacturing here also, but they integrate the whole thing and put it out. So I have given you the comment of one arm called the Armored Corps of Infantry. So likewise, the mechanized infantry have got futuristic infantry combat vehicles, which is coming. They have got the programs for upgrade of BMPs. Artillery is getting their whole, 155 millimeter caliber of guns. And now recently they have also given another order, or they are on the verge of giving another order worth around 200 of the self-propelled tanks, K9 Vajra tanks to Larsen & Toubro. Now Larsen & Toubro is doing a big integration job in their Hazira complex. they have their own set of, other industries who are supplying components to them. And so likewise, you can take air defense, for example. It is almost entirely based out of Russian equipment. And we are looking for, items which can be, we are looking for opportunities on how they can be indigenized. So like this, for each arm and service, there are these, requirements, and there are sustenance requirements for them, which can be met. So these are for warlike stores. And in non-warlike stores, like I said, whether it's in terms of clothing, whether it is in terms of, other accoutrements and supplies which are required to hit a soldier, which are required to habitat a soldier, and so on, all of that. There are opportunities now. If you see things have unfolded in Eastern Ladakh, there was a sudden, surge in the requirement of habitat for high altitude. So a whole lot of industries who are in this, field of prefab shelters and so on, suddenly found their opportunity here, and to meet those environmental conditions. So they have gone in and they have all got their big opportunity there, and now they have taken off, because it started off in Eastern Ladakh, and now all along the northern front we are seeing, new deployments with new requirements of habitats, with enlarged requirement of habitat. So that's how these opportunities keep unfolding. I have tried, obviously I have, because I don't know the specific interest of the industry, so I've tried to answer the question in more general terms. Back to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very well answered, General Rao. So the one challenge which is there, and that's also one of the question which was raised by Jayaji, who is there with us. And so it says that for organizations which have limited or let's say no connections to the forces, how do you advise them to join the DPP?
Okay, so see, the thing is, depending on which industry that you are in, so the answer will again will be made specific to that. Okay. So to begin with, I would recommend firstly is entry either as a subsidiary of one of the defense public sector units or one of the larger defense industries, because you'll be able to align yourself and get a sense. And because these DPSUs and the larger industries obviously have deeper pockets, and so therefore they have more patience. So they are able to, run the course more easily. So if a smaller industry is looking to participate, so that seems like a, good, safe way to enter. Besides that, as I said, in the Army Commander Special Financial Powers, where the time requirement of the procurement is much shorter. So therefore, for industries who are wanting to enter, and obviously they're looking for a relatively quicker return of investment, that seems like a more easy approach. But if you're wanting to enter in the non-warlike, domain of things, then obviously the whole process gets a lot simplified. And all you have to do is, keep tracking the request for proposals that come from time to time. In fact, typically it starts with a request for information, graduates to a request for proposal, then it goes to the trial process and gets into that, typical commercial bid and technical bid converging together and signing of the contract. So depending on what exactly is your area of interest, if you let me know directly or indirectly, I can see how what should be the best route for you.
I think that will probably be an answer to this next question also, which is, it's what we're saying is that that the Defense Ministry or the Department of Defense Production, I mean, they should come out with some sort of a method for improving the interaction. That way it will be easier for any new startup or any other organizations to actually understand the process and how it works.
A lot has improved. A lot has improved. It is not that more can't be done. And we see even on their websites and things like that, all these RFIs, RFPs are put out over there. So that's a good starting point, from where you can get the initial information and then see how you want to, which is the approach that you want to take to achieve your mission.
Absolutely. So I would come back to our discussion when we started with the session, and where Colonel Saab, the Colonel Ashok Prabhakar and Colonel VP Singh was saying that this is just a start, and we need to actually have a face-to-face interaction, and we need to understand more about it and how things can take up. So that's all we have with the questions. I'll request Colonel Ashok Prabhakar to take it over from here.
Thank you, Jatin. Thank you, sir, for a wonderful session today indeed. Thanks for taking your valuable time off and joining us. You can just see from the number of questions which have been pouring in, sir, that the kind of interest which has been generated. People are coming across with questions from all across the domain, starting from afresh to what is existing. So I suppose that the very aim, sir, that we started with has been fully achieved. You've covered how somebody like a unicorn can also enter, the startups can enter, and the strategic partners are already in place, how they can be, one can go across and join the strategic partners also and contribute in various fashions. So it pains when we import, we happen to be among the second largest importer of weapons across the world after Saudi Arabia. It means that your industry is supporting, the IT industry is supporting the entire world. And when it comes to supporting our own equipment, we are importing from elsewhere. So it's wonderful, sir, that the government, the PM, and the complete system as such has come forward and started afresh in this field. So the dough which gets generated, the money which gets generated, stays in the country, makes Atmanirbhar. You only seen of late how India is exporting BrahMos, which is something between us and Russia, Brahmaputra plus Moscow. So this weapon system is getting exported to a whole lot of countries. So I suppose we had the experience, we had the knowledge. It's just that the gaps were there. I suppose those administrative gaps are getting bridged now, and we only have a lot of good coming forward. Thank you, sir. We are really grateful. And like I was requesting you earlier, sir, I suppose at the end of it, you'll agree that yes, the team out here is interested, and we will certainly look forward to more, such gyan from your side, sir, so that the interest which has got generated. And I'm sure once we have this, ladies and gentlemen who couldn't have joined today, when they're going to be seeing it subsequently, so there will be a whole lot of more interest coming in. So I suppose we will be that much more wiser, and we'll be able to take it ahead. I think that's great news for the forces as such, for the ministry as such, and for the country as such, that we're moving forward in the right direction. Indeed grateful, sir. Thank you. Thanks for taking your time off. And thanks also, a big thanks to Colonel VP that you pressed upon, in spite of Jan Saha's continuous engagements. You've been at it, and we finally could get his valuable time and hear him out today. I think we're really grateful that we had this opportunity today. And thanks, folks. Also, you all have joined in, who contributed in various manners to your questions. This is just something. It's just a starting point today. You see the kind of options which are available. I'm sure that whichever field you are in, whichever organization you are in, you all leaders out here. I suppose at the end of this, we can walk up to our leaders and see in which manner the armed forces are like a country itself. You require everything, right from a normal uniform, from food to everything. Jan Saha mentioned about examples from Siachen Glacier. So you require, stay. As far as stay is concerned, you require normal living material. You require. One doesn't have to go into war zone, war material only. You require daily, usable items where each one of us can pitch in. So please go across, spread the word across. The government is doing a great job. Leaders like Jan Saha, who are contributing to this, are doing a big way. So we should come forward and do a little bit. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And thanks, everyone, sir. Anything else, sir? Anybody? Jatin?
No, sir. I think at last I would say thank you so much for your time once again. This is a really pleasure having you with us. And on that regards, we'd like to end this session here. So thank you once again. Thank you so much to all the participants. Please take care. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.